short for Muhammad Alum. I've dedicated my life to serving my country. Over the past 8 years, I have been inducted into the CIA via the military, and I'm being processed for a high-level security clearance known as a Yankee White. I found that executive officers are absolutely robbing our country blind to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars per individual security clearance. It is rotten from top to bottom, and it is a massive contributor to the inflation our country is experiencing. This is devaluing the dollar, which is a great risk to our national security and is affecting our entire world. The graft ranges through the military generals themselves, all the way through their entire chain of subordinates and the outside organizations they involve. I have had a long-standing reputation as a model airman in my time with the U.S. Air Force. From the CIA training squadron, I was handpicked as a candidate for the Secret Service. This is my story. In the process of being processed for my Yankee White Security-Clearance, I became aware that my perceived autism was being used as an excuse to try to use me as a vessel for embezzlement. I was effectively being subjected to appalling treatment and human trafficking because they intended to rob me of the damages compensation that I was to be owed at the end of the security clearance process. They intended to do so by taking away my ability to have access to food, water, and shelter, and then arguing to a court that I am unable to care for myself. They interfere with my life by wearing state-of-the-art disguises that the CIA themselves uses in real-world operations, including face masks called quad nods, and using their spy tradecraft to sabotage me. Most helpful to their effort is, of course, the billions of dollars they pool together and invest in their criminal enterprise. This vast slush fund allows them to buy businesses where I'm employed, and also to rent out entire apartment complexes to deny me access to housing. They even make sure to take ownership and act as employees at mental hospitals where they can wear police uniforms and send me over there under the false pretenses of me needing mental help. In this video, I describe the dirt dug up on our premier military officials that allows them to be easily coerced and blackmailed to allow this kind of massive embezzlement by their co-conspirators and by the very people that are blackmailing them. They, in turn, turn a blind eye to the constant rape, frequent attempted murder, and overall fraudulent process of conducting a military training exercise and a security clearance adjudication process. One individual who is the subject of this coercion and manipulation is General Charles Brown, the Chief of Staff of our United States Air Force. Not only was his arm twisted into letting the slimy human trafficking take place, but he also played a role being a leader of that plot. He was there when the evidence was manipulated and removed from my digital devices using cyber weapon systems with the help of Alet Abu Shanab and Sayaf Abdullah. He was there when I was raped at a black site by his own military staff. He was there when sexual abuse occurred at another medical facility. And he was there when I was frequently raped by a prostitute that he solicited, the wife of Saif ul-Haq. The security clearance has been a process that I've been experiencing for the last 10 years of my life. It has turned out that it's taking this long because it is an organized long con to enrich the elite to torture me for as long as possible. The abuse that I've recently been subjected to has gotten so extreme that there have been attempts on my life. The long con includes government officials, including generals, arranging to embezzle hundreds of billions of US dollars from the taxpayers directly right out of our Treasury Department. The way these military officers siphon these defense coffers is via coordination with privately run spy agencies who are contracted to conduct the security clearance investigation. Involving an outside entity, such as a contracting spy organization, is done to separate the complicity of those who operate and rig the war game exercises from those who are conducting the racketeering effort while pretending to be conducting a security clearance investigation. The separation of entities, thus, is supposed to create an air of plausible deniability. In reality, this is a fixed boxing match where the winners of what is forged to look like a fair war game is actually the people who organize the event. What's supposed to be a war game or a military training exercise thus becomes a huge sham, and just an act of embezzling and forcing a loss on an individual. The loss being the security clearance damages compensation that the individual is owed. What do these individuals stand to gain by doing this much damage to, singular individuals who are attempting to receive their security clearance in an honest way? Well, they stand to gain hundreds of billions of dollars, and that's just per individual security clearance. Yankee White security clearances are very thorough because they clear the individual to have access to the most sensitive state secrets and work amongst the most important national figures. However, what creates such a massive cost of the thorough investigation isn't just the natural costs of investigations, operations, and damages compensation. The expenses are artificially ballooned by the selfish, self-enrichment manner in which the investigations are carried out. In my personal experience, this also involves intentionally extending the investigation process for as long as possible to the tune of years and years. This is partially done to give more time for the corrupt investigators to attempt to ruin the individual's life, to get to their end goal of robbing the very same socially and economically individual that they isolated, the individual that they isolated socially and economically. So for 10 years, I have been targeted and have been kept from having the coherence and normalcy of my life by the individuals in charge of this process. I was regularly sabotaged with false arrests, unjustified evictions, frequent gaslighting and theft, and even rapes and attempted murders, all because I seemed vulnerable to them and an easier target to rob of security clearance compensation. Being close to the end of the clearance process now, where the damages compensation that I'm owed is due to be paid out anytime, I am being targeted more and more often and harder than ever by very desperate individuals who invested years and years in attempting to embezzle hundreds of billions of dollars. All of these experiences can, without doubt, be connected to those very same individuals who are conducting the security clearance, whose names and identities I have. The individuals who serve the evictions are from my former military unit. The individuals who show up in police uniforms and intern me at the mental hospital under the guise of me being a danger to myself or others without any evidence and without any justification are also individuals from my former military unit. The individuals who are stalking me, wearing disguises, and robbing me are also individuals who operate a private spy agency who is contracted to conduct my security clearance investigation. I know these individuals because I know their spy agency and I know their process of being inducted into the agency. This includes people such as Sayyaf Abdullah, Saif ul Haq, Muhammad Hassan, Muhammad Mustafa, Hassan Mustafa, Murad al-Zubaydi, Ala Abu Shanab, and many more. This private spy agency operated out of Arizona Cultural Academy and the fire department built right next to it. These two structures were built at the same time with the intent of raising the Muslim community that funded these structures to grow into the intelligence community right out of school. Now, I know those individuals that go to that spy agency and that entire community because I grew up with them. In fact, my siblings went to that school. By working towards sabotaging my access to food, water, and shelter, these two organizations have formed an organized crime act that is effectively working towards attempting to force me into a legal conservatorship. That would be a guardianship by an adult. Once this is done, the security clearance is going to be adjudicated and the damages compensation is going to be issued by the powers that are in cahoots with the corrupt investigation spy organization that I mentioned earlier. Then these funds that I'm owed for all the damages that they intentionally incurred to me, those funds are going to be siphoned off and robbed by the individual who has legal guardianship over me. Their excuse being that they need that money to go ahead and use to take care of me because I am supposedly, allegedly unwell. That is going to be their excuse, and that is their modus operandi for their scam. Now, the U.S. citizen who's slated for a security clearance, this is how they usually carry out that scam. They're selected for being vulnerable or perceived as vulnerable. I was perceived as being autistic and quiet. because I had to pretend to be autistic to help take care of somebody with fetal alcohol syndrome who wouldn't hang out with anybody that he felt might intimidate him or might not be also be special needs. So his parents and family wanted me to pretend to be special needs to hang around him. His name is Saif ul Haq, and he suffers from microcephaly and fetal alcohol syndrome. And he took those words that his parents put in my mouth so that I could take care of him and ran with them and started a whole military operation to assume that I was autistic and unable to care for myself so that he could take advantage of that fact and rob me of security clearance compensation that he attempted to pork barrel into me. Now, pork barreling would be if a government official or a politician was intentionally able to direct funds to a place where they would later have access to. So it's self-aggrandizing, it's self-serving, and it's something that he was up to. Now, that's effectively why they targeted me. They thought that I was going to be very vulnerable, when in reality, that turned out not to be the case. And now they're acting on very desperate measures. They're resorting to rape and they're resorting to attempted murder. Now, they figured they would be able to harass me and drive me crazy very easily and then rob me of these hundreds of billions of dollars in damages they caused me. They have attempted to do this via their established modus operandi that I stated earlier. They mean to cause me damages, ruin my life by wearing disguises and using their military weaponry and spycraft training. Then they mean to put me under a conservatorship. In the process of defending myself from this mafia criminal organization, I have had to attempt to argue for restraining orders against these very individuals whose identities I am aware of. These judges are actually military officers that I also know the identities of, and without shame, they show up to the courtroom acting as the judge, only to deny me the restraining order or orders of protection or injunctions against harassment. One such individual is Mike Hughes, a director that is part of the CIA. Another example of an individual that is a military officer and a lawyer that acts as a judge when I go to a courtroom to get a restraining order is Danielle Olson. Both presented themselves as judges and denied me restraining orders against the very individuals who are intentionally ruining my life by robbing me of finances, raping, and regularly interfering with my access to food, water, and shelter in order to later falsely justify a conservatorship. And, I guess their reasoning is they have been conducting this scam for 10 years and they feel justified to take any extreme measures to go, also including rape, attempted murder, and interfering with my rights to a normal court hearing. All this is done to ensure that their scam would not fall apart. The rapes are done in hopes of billing me for sexual services for Saif Abdullah the brothel, and also in hopes of getting me to fall in love with the hand-picked chosen spouses. Now, these hand-chosen spouses and women are always women they have control over. For example, Saif ul Haq's wife, who goes by Viola ul Haq, is somebody that tried flirting with me and regularly raped me and attempted to call it a consensual relationship, when in reality, Saif Abdullah was regularly threatening my life if I didn't go through with the nightly acts. Another example would be Saif Abdullah's very wife. She regularly sends me nude photos, and flirts with me, brags about being an F-16 pilot, and if I wanted to be an F-16 pilot, I had to go through with the act. But as far as I know, because they do regularly anesthetize me without consent, as far as I know, I have not had relations with her. Another individual would be Lilia Bernanke, very good friends with Viola ul Haq, Saif ul Haq's wife. Lilia Bernanke found out that Saif ul Haq's mansion was seized by the government as some sort of restitution for damages that he caused me, information that I was not aware of, but would have been made aware of at the end of the security clearance process, which Saif ul Haq himself is investigating and extending for as long as possible, with the blessing of General Brown. More on that later. Lilia Bernanke, daughter of former U.S. Treasurer Ben Bernanke, is unsurprisingly attempting to rob the Treasury of hundreds of billions of dollars that is owed to me because of damages that they caused me. Lilia Bernanke, like Viola Ulhuck, is known to be very overly promiscuous. Viola Ulhuck, for example, and Lilia Bernanke go around town and perform oral sex on many, many men, and that is a regular activity that they conduct. Viola Ulhuck admitted to me that she is on a strict semen-only diet. So these women are prostitutes, hookers, and downright whores. And I don't say that as an insult. That's just an absolutely astute description of who they are. And they are under control. They have suffer from a sex addiction, and they are being used. And so those are the hand-picked, attempts at arranged marriages. It's always women they have control over, always women that are within their community, and always women that they intend to use to rob me of my security clearance compensation damages. Since they haven't been able to put me under a conservatorship, since I got legal affidavits affirming that what these individuals were up to that are logged with the courts, they have resorted to attempting to get a woman to marry me so that she can take half of the damages, when the divorce inevitably would come. So that's some of the things they're doing. And, the rape is just absolute desperation and attempts by Sayef Abdullah to say that he is taking care of my health and he feels that he should be charging me for the sex acts, which I just don't think is justifiable, especially when it's rape. So other ways they attempt to raise the amount of damages compensation, unscrupulously, is by intentionally causing the individual more damages. So by extending the period of time in which they are supposedly investigating me for security clearance compensation for my security clearance, they're able to get more and more compensation for the extended contract. They also have more time and more opportunity to intentionally cause me damages in which I would be compensated for, compensation in which they intend to steal. So by perpetrating these rapes, attempted murders, tortures, beatings, and unfair work environments, racism and robberies, and so on and so forth, while wearing their state-of-the-art disguises that they are issued via their spy agencies and via their state-of-the-art government assassin jobs. Many of these individuals are generals, admirals, and various other military officers. They are able to increase the bounty, effectively, that they attempt to steal. There's no regard for sanctity of life or for preserving the U.S. airmen who intended to serve this country. They have no regard for that. Examples of high-ranking individuals who have access to high-tech weaponry that they use against me is Saif Ulhuck. He's a one-star admiral. Sayef Abdullah told me that he's a two-star admiral. They frequently brag about being trained assassins. They frequently rub their assassin weapons in my face. They quite literally send their snake weapons into my bedroom by getting rooms within the same dorm complex and within the same apartment itself, in fact. And this fiber optic snake camera that they prod me with in the nighttime, which is effectively like a robotic arm, very flexible and very far-reaching. They brag about using the camera to spy on me. They prod my genitalia to sexually assault me. And they also brag about being able to stick a poison tip on there to hurt me. Just the other day, Saif Ulhuck stabbed me in the foot with his assassin snake weapon because he was insulted that Sayef Abdullah outed him as a homosexual. And I don't take issue with people's sexuality, and I wasn't, attempting to provoke some sort of response, but being that he lives in the room just down the hall and goes by the name of Bao while wearing a disguise, he felt justified in immediately, responding with physical violence. And that is beyond the rape that him and his wife regularly perpetrate by anesthetizing me with gas in my bedroom and going about their business to try to force and coerce me into some sort of polyamorous relationship, which obviously, if you can't tell, I do not want. And so, yeah, those are some of the high-ranking individuals that I deal with. Another high-ranking individual that I deal with is Ethan Tersini. His mother, General Tersini, is very responsible for covering up a rape that happened at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base to me at a black site. And she's been covering it up and covering it up and trying anything and everything. And these days, Ethan Tersini lives within my same dorm complex with no reason other than to harass me and break into my dorm and even sexually harass me. The other day, he sent me a nude photo of himself in attempts to seduce me. His mother really wants me to look gay, even though I'm a straight male, because she's attempting to pretend that the rape that she had her sergeants perpetrate at the black site, she's attempting to say that that was consensual somehow. Despite the fact that I was put under, she's attempting to say that it was consensual and that it's something that I wanted. And so since then, she's been regularly having gay individuals harass me to try to, paint this narrative that I wanted what she served me, which just is not the case. And she's so desperate, in fact, that just the other day, she showed up to my old serving job at Heroes Sushi, and her husband were talking about how they couldn't wait to go home and give each other a gigantic cream pie, and that I should totally join them, which I totally brushed off and pretended I didn't understand their little invitation. But that's how awkward and weird things are getting. She's hoeing off her straight son to act gay, and she herself is trying to have a threesome with me. Another individual that is high-ranking and involved in the scam is General Charles Brown. Now, General Charles Brown, his executive assistant is actually Lilia Bernanke, daughter of Ben Bernanke. That used to be his executive assistant. Her pseudonym that she goes by is Jessica Brown. They know each other very well, and I don't doubt that they have had some sexual intimacy in the past, considering how promiscuous she is, and considering how General Brown regularly solicits prostitutes. General Charles Brown, the chief of staff of the U.S. Air Force, is gifted prostitutes by Sayyaf Abdullah. Now, Sayyaf Abdullah runs this private spy agency that operates out of that area I told you about, that private Muslim school and the private fire department. That spy agency that they operate in that general area, Sayyaf Abdullah is in charge of that, and he was contracted to investigate my security clearance. Now, Sayyaf Abdullah is a former youth pastor of mine, and he is a former employer of mine, and he intentionally went out to investigate my security clearance because he knew me, because he figured he would have an in and he would have intelligence enough to try to go after me and, to rob me of my security clearance compensation. He thought he knew me so well and that he was a perfect guy for the job. And so he worked out an agreement with General Charles Brown, and the way he's able to twist General Charles Brown into giving him this security clearance is that not only are they buddy-buddy, but Sayyaf Abdullah has dirt on General Charles Brown. General Charles Brown solicits prostitutes from Sayyaf Abdullah. And so, just like that, our general of the entire Air Force was compromised. And he had to give this hundreds of billions of dollar contract over to Sayyaf Abdullah. And not only was he just compromised, but he's also in on the scam, and he helps lead the scam. And so what that general does is he was there at the very same mental hospitals where I was forcibly interned at by his very same military troops and military officers. He was, just so guilty of all these dirty things, and it's pretty awful to see a very high-ranking government official so close to our president doing these kinds of things and being a part of such a huge embezzlement scandal. As far as high-ranking individuals goes, that's a good primer. General Tersini is a wing commander of over at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, and she regularly punished me and tortured me for reporting a rape that occurred. So basically, there is a little bit of torture training that happens called SEER. And when you go to SEER school, they send you to this little mental hospital. They have a bunch of airmen around you acting crazy, but even they can't keep it together, and you know, they let you in on the fact that it's all just an act and everything's going to be okay. And so that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be just a little training exercise. It's supposed to be just a little, you know, resiliency during torture. This is how to act if you're ever a prisoner of war. But what actually happened is a power tripping military officer, actually raped me. And yeah, so long story short, he assaulted me. And then he said, this is what the kinds of things we're going to do to you. And there were periods of times where they injected me with needles and put me under, and I have no recollection of the fact. But then I suffered sexual injuries, and I reported that, right? And when I got back to base from their black site, and I reported the injuries, and I reported what happened and who did it, the people at that SAPR unit, which is Sexual Assault Prevention and Response, that the individuals at that unit who are supposed to ask you, okay, well, do you want this to be an open report or a closed report? They didn't ask me those questions. Instead, what they did is they shut down the entire topic. They basically shooed me off and said, there's nothing we can do about it. This is not our problem. And they sent me back to my dorm. Now, the next day, when I went to lunch and went to pick up some quick food from the commissary, none other than Jim Puhek was there when I was leaving the commissary. And he was complaining about where I parked my bicycle. He said, why'd you park your bike here? There's a bike rack over there. And, you know, there's always people smoking at the bike rack over there. And so I was not interested in parking my bike there because I was taking care of my lungs and trying to get a better run time. I was aiming towards getting a record on base, you know, a good running speed record. And so, you know, he just kept arguing. He didn't like my answer, and he just kept BSing me, basically. It's like, it wasn't a big deal. My bicycle was leaning up against a brick pillar. It wasn't in anybody's way. It wasn't in any shopping cart's way. It wasn't in a wheelchair's way, nothing, right? So he was just stirring up the pot. And, you know, I basically just gave him my peace of mind and walked away and, you know, took my bike and rode off. And I just didn't care for, you know, some senile old guy that's trying to stir the pot for no reason. And you know, the next day at work, security forces from on base shows up and they arrest me. And I asked them why I was being arrested, and they said, well, you assaulted this old man. Do you know who that old man was? That's Jim Puhek. Now, I had met Linda Puhek, who lived just across the street from Rebecca Bauer, who I was roommates with. I was forced to live with Rebecca Bauer after somebody intentionally flooded my apartment. And so it's all just a sequence of events that's part of this criminal conspiracy. So I was forced to live with Rebecca Bauer. Right across the street from her shows up Linda Puhek. Linda liked the fact that I was taking care of her father, Leander Ostendorf, really old guy, you know, just have a beer with him, have a drink with him, give him, you know, have some words with him so he doesn't get lonely while his family wasn't visiting. And she's from a military family. She said, oh, you're joining the military. We're from a military family. Why don't you have us take care of you? And so when I went to BMT, when I went to tech school, I was selected for very competitive programs, obviously including the Yankee White Security-Clearance. And everything seemed nice and dandy. You know, she told me her husband, Jim Puhek, was in charge of war games exercises, which I thought was cool. I didn't really understand it. But what it turned out was they were going to use their position within the government to attempt to pork barrel me and to attempt to embezzle money through me, effectively using me as some sort of vessel for their embezzlement. When in reality, I was only in it to serve my country, and, you know, security clearance that's a bit high up seemed very cool. And so, you know, much later on, I also found out that Jim Puhek is my very sister's father-in-law. So my sister, who put on a police uniform at one point and arrested me and interned me in a mental hospital under false pretenses, that very sister is a close associate of Jim Puhek. Now, that Jim Puhek, when I showed up to work one day, turns out that's the guy that was arguing with me in front of the commissary about where my bicycle was parked. He was intentionally trying to pick a fight with me because when I reported the sexual assault, he was no longer able to cleanly remove my finances from me. It would be very clear that he was a part of a criminal effort and that he resorted to very dirty actions involving, including rape. And so the next day when I showed up to work, security forces are there, like I was saying earlier, and those guys arrest me, they come in, with their ARs and they're like, hey, are you Muhammad? You're under arrest. And I was like, okay, I put my hands up. I was like, I have a knife right here in my waistband. They're like, that's no problem. Come towards us with your hands up, walk towards us backwards. So I did that whole charade and they made a whole show of it. They put me on the floor, they undressed me, took my belt off, took my shirt off and kept it over my hands. They did a whole song and dance just to, give me the whole, hey, mister, you're in trouble treatment, And I asked them, hey, what am I in trouble for? And they're like, oh, we'll tell you later. And what they told me later was that gentleman in front of the commissary, that was Jim Puhek, General Jim Puhek, and you assaulted him. I was like, no, I didn't lay a finger on him. We were just talking about where my bicycle was parked, and it was a verbal disagreement, and I didn't even raise my voice. I didn't so much as even raise my voice or look at him wrong. It's just, I calmly just realized that this was a senile person, and I walked off, after giving a polite end to the conversation. And so anyways, it turns out that was Jim Puhek, my sister's father-in-law, the general of war games, the person that pretended to be visiting across the street from Officer Rebecca Bauer, that I was made to live with, an associate of a former employer of mine. And so that's the sequence of events that shows how all these people are related and how they know each other and how they were all part of this in one way or another. Now, when I was arrested, I was put in solitary confinement on base. With no justification. I wasn't biting or spitting on people or being mean to anybody, but they put me in solitary for a while. Okay, that was fine. I did okay there. And then they sent me right back to the Black Site Mental Hospital where they sent me in the first place. And what they were attempting to do was clean up the fact that the first time around, when I was at the mental hospital, they committed rape, right? They were trying to come up with some sort of clean footage so that they could erase what they had done. But I remember the fact that I went twice, and so that's kind of seems stupid. Beyond the fact that they have AI video editing technology where they could just make whatever they want to see happen. But I guess there's ways to notice that, and so if they were internally investigated, so they were just looking for ways to kind of clean up and pretend nothing happened and hope that I would forget it all. And it was punishment, it was torture all over again. They sent me over there, they tortured me there all over again. And this is all because Jim Puhek didn't get his way. Jim Puhek wasn't able to embezzle hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars through me. All the damages that I incurred over a period of maybe 10 years, definitely 10 years, he wasn't able to just rob me of. And he felt entitled to that for some reason because he's some sort of general, because he spent a bunch of years with the military, he's entitled to other people's damages compensation. I didn't like that, doesn't make sense to me. So I just, stayed headstrong and I moved along. Now, it didn't end there. What they did is after I got back to base from that second stint at the torture facility, they went ahead and made sure to lock me up in my dorm. And what they didn't physically lock me in there, but what they said is, if you leave your dorm, we're going to have you arrested. And so I had to call my superiors and have them bring me food. Now, the reason they wanted to keep me in my dorm is they didn't want me to go to the SAPR office again. They didn't want me to attempt to make an official report. They were trying to suppress any attempts of me reporting that they are rapists, which they very much are. And so they would keep me in my dorm. They would make me call them when I needed them to bring me food, but they wouldn't regularly bring me food. They bring me food once a day. Sometimes they would pretend they forgot. Sometimes they would pretend they were too busy, as if they didn't work on the same base that I worked on, and as if we weren't all sitting around all day. And so, that was just further torture. They just wanted me to be kept in my room and not be a danger to their embezzlement operation. And it didn't end there. They ended my enlistment term early. They said instead of a 4-year enlistment period, we're going to do a short enlistment of 3 years, like some other branches do. And so I got an honorable discharge and stuff, but they were doing it in a very shady way where they just wanted me to go away because they realized they would get in trouble if I had any chance to report things on base, which even when I went to the reporting center, those people were basically ignoring me and treating me like crap. And so I went back to the civilian world. I moved from Tucson, where Davis Monthan Air Force Base was located. I moved over to Phoenix, and I became a university student full-time. I worked at a machine shop full-time as well. And I lived with somebody named Saif Ulhaq. Now, at the time, I had known him, and he introduced himself to me as Safir Huq, right? That's what he told me his name was. And so, and he had known me for years and years, right? So we're talking since the end of high school and into the beginning of college, Safir Huq knew me. And what Safir did is he actually was secretly an admiral with the Navy. And he went to ACA, the Arizona Cultural Academy, that private school I told you about earlier, where they graduate straight into the intelligence community because their parents pay for it. What Safir Huq did, and what Saif Ulhaq did, is he became a really nasty, bad roommate to me. Now, the reason I lived with him is because he suffers from microcephaly and fetal alcohol syndrome. So he is effectively, clinically, suffers from clinical retardation. And he's very much intellectually disabled. All his friends recognize that he's stupid, and so does his community. And all of those people that he knows vetted me when I moved in with him, right? They would all visit, they would all feel me out, they would talk about different things. One of those individuals that I know and he knows is Fahim Firoz. He was like, oh yeah, I know Mohammed. Mohammed's a good guy. He's interested in electrical engineering. I'm an electrical engineer. I work at a defense company. He was in the military. We all got along. And so, not only did he clear me to move in with him, but his family and friends and community also vetted me as a good person to take care of him and his special needs. And but things took a turn for the worse. He started stirring the pot, making issues. He started pointing his loaded firearms at me at some point. He would no longer clean after himself, and he would treat me like his maid. And when I politely put my foot down, I said, "Hey, you got to clean up after yourself. You can't put filthy dishes right back in the cupboard. It's kind of gross. It's very gross. You gotta wash dishes, or at least leave them in the sink. You gotta clean that poop that's on your actual toilet seat off the toilet seat." So I would tell him things like that, things you would tell a special needs person if you lived with them, and I put it as politely as I could, the way you would treat somebody with needs like that. And he just didn't like it. And I figured he was having issues with those small things, and that's why he was taking issue with me. But as it turns out, I wasn't falling for a lot of his gaslighting. He'd bring wine glasses and stack them in the sink, and as soon as I moved them, they would crack, and he'd try to charge me for them. He would gaslight me by moving objects around in my room and in hopes of saying that I was feeling crazy, but I would never, feel that way, so I never admitted that way. I just noticed that he was going in my room. And so when his plan of making me out to be crazy so that he could put me under a conservatorship wasn't working, he got desperate, and he started pointing his loaded firearms at me, and he was like, "You're my bitch, you live in my house, do you know how wealthy I am? I'm not Safir Huq, I'm Saif Ulhaq. Don't you know my family name? We're super wealthy. We own car dealerships and we own tons of real estate. And my father works at Southwest Airlines, and I don't work at Chase Bank in finance, you idiot. I'm a spy. I work for the CIA, and their cover is Chase Bank." All this nonsense. I wasn't caving to it even when he was pointing loaded firearms at me. I just started documenting everything because I was like, yo, I got to get out of here. I'm a full-time student. I have a full-time job, and I spend my evenings wiping this guy's butt and cleaning up after him. I'm just going to cut that part of my life out because he became a danger to me. And so eventually I resorted to getting a restraining order. And it was very clear that Saif Ulhaq had spyware on my computer, because when I left with my restraining order, he left that same day, that same very morning, with a restraining order as well. And, that was after I called the police on him like 3 different times for pointing firearms at me, for bringing his friends over to try to point firearms at me. That was after the police came over several times. And the police that came over were members of my former military unit from 612 ACOMS from the 12th Air Force. the folks that work for the Secret Service and the CIA, and they seem to always side with Saif. You know, they were always being extra nice to him. Instead of being like, hey, like you can't have access to firearms anymore, you admitted to pointing them at people. You need to be arrested for your misuse and misresponsibility with a loaded firearm. Instead of doing all that, they just kind of sided with him and were as nice to him as possible. And it's like, I get that he's special needs, but he's threatening my life. And so I went the next morning. I went and got a restraining order from the judge, and the judge granted it, of course, being that I had all this documentation, all this evidence, all his admissions of wanting to put me under illegal conservatorship, being that he's with the military, and being that I had a security clearance compensation on the way, which I never thought about until he brought it up. He told me he was going to take all my money and make me his bitch because I was poor and he wasn't. And so I went to the judge and I said, look, this is all the things that's happening. This guy's pointing guns at me. And the judge reasonably said, yeah, you get exclusive living rights to the house, and this guy can't be within 30 yards of you or whatever. And so, that kind of happened. I didn't really stay at the house because he kept bullying me and bringing his friends to threaten me and breaking into the home while I wasn't there. He kept doing all of those things and setting up like microphones in my room with like an obvious black wire and stuff. So he was kind of a mess. And I told my brother what was happening, and he got me a tech job over in California. We're not on speaking terms anymore because that tech job that he got me was through his brother-in-law's company, and it was like 4 weeks in, and they still hadn't paid me, and they were coming up with excuses, and they're like, well, you didn't file this. And I was like, I have proof on my laptop that I filed my bank information for payment, my direct deposit information. And I thought it would be nice because they were a contract company for Facebook, but they were kind of a scam company. It was Tests Assured that was started by Usama Arthman, and so I had problems with that company, and that they seemed like they were just digging the hole that I just came out of in Arizona even deeper. And so I was like, look, I got to move on, and I did move on, and I couldn't trust my brother or his wife anymore because they seemed to side with the special needs guy that was pointing loaded firearms at me in his home for no reason, no justifiable reason. So I was like, I can't trust you folks. I'm sorry. My brother would be giving Saif ul Haq, who stalked me over to California, and was regularly stalking me when I lived there. My brother would give him like home cooked meals and stuff. And I kind of get it. They grew up around each other in Arizona too, and my brother knew that this guy's special needs because his mother used to be an alcoholic. I think she's dead now. But point is, I was like, you guys are in cahoots with somebody who's trying to be my worst enemy. Like, I can't do that. So I moved on. And Saiful had just kept stalking me around the country, and Sayyaf Abdullah would always argue on his behalf, and I didn't understand why until they both admitted that they were with the same military unit, and they were both generals, and they had each other's backs. And turns out Saif ul Haq was Sayyaf Abdullah's, errand boy, basically. And eventually I realized that all these people are so dirty, and they just want my security clearance compensation. I mean, they're not, they don't suspect me of being some sort of danger to this country. Like, I'm more patriotic than they are, and they're generals, and they're always bad-mouthing the country, not even in productive, constructive criticism ways, just like, they Saif ul Haq would be like, Pakistan Zindabad. Pakistan is #1 in his language. And it's like, I mean, yeah, I get it. It's good to be proud of your heritage and stuff, but there's a reason you live here and you don't live there, right? And so they were all full of baloney, and they were all just raping me and attempting to murder me. And, Sayyaf Abdullah even snuck some fentanyl in my medication one day and bragged about it on social media the next day. So these guys are attempting to murder me, threatening my life, using their assassin weapons against me. And it's all so they can process a Yankee White Security-Clearance. Like, seems like the most irresponsible way to go about that. And all along, General Charles Brown is in on this. I mean, he's the guy that gets the final say. He's the guy that gets to adjudicate a security clearance. And he's buddy-buddy with these guys that give him prostitutes and their wives to sleep with, right? And so General Charles Brown, the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, is in cahoots with these guys, And instead of adjudicating my security clearance, he just lets them postpone and postpone and postpone because they're working on my downfall so they can try to put me under conservatorship. In which case, after the conservatorship is made, they'd be like, hey, General Charles Brown, we got him. Go ahead and issue the security clearance. Go ahead and issue his damages compensation. And, once the damages compensation come, they siphon it off because they have legal guardianship over me, or that's what they're fighting for, right? And that's what they would want to do. And they would be able to siphon all of those finances off in nefarious ways with excuses as to why. And they own a monopoly over all of this process. These military people that run the war game exercises, they have the right to wear police uniforms and act as police when they want to. And so they can arrest me and put me in a mental hospital and say, oh, well, he was a danger to himself or others. And I would ask them, I'd be like, well, am I a danger to myself or am I a danger to others? And how did you come to that conclusion? And they would never have a suitable answer. In many of the times that they have done that to me and put me on a medical hold for supposed mental health reasons, they weren't able to ever come up with a reason. And the medical hold always turned out to be bunk. The doctor always released me and said there's no cause. And so, these guys have a monopoly over the whole process. They can act as police and do that. Not only that, but the very mental hospitals they send me to are mental hospitals they own. For example, Community Bridges Incorporated, Ahmed Abdullah, Sayyaf Abdullah, the general, his own little brother runs that place. He's a nurse technician there. His buddies are nurse technicians there. We're talking Hassan Mustafa, Muhammad Hassan, all these folks that went to ACA together and work in the intelligence community together and are in a military unit together. They have a monopoly over this whole security clearance process and all the stages that it would take to rip somebody off of the finances, including the police, including the medical facilities, including the private spy agencies, just every step of the way. And, and instead of General Charles Brown doing the right thing and adjudicating my security clearance, being that they've investigated for some 10 odd years now, instead of doing that, he's fallen victim to the arm twisting of Jim Puhek, the general of war games, and also Sayyaf Abdullah, some sort of pervert rapist general that blackmails other generals with prostitutes that he passes around. Prostitutes, which includes Saif ul Haq's wife, who goes by Viola ul Haq, who attempted to falsify a relationship with me and force a marriage with me, as did Lilia Bernanke, Ben Bernanke's daughter, and the former, executive assistant of General Charles Brown. And so it's this whole mess, and it's all a big robbery, and it's all a big fraud, and it's not like their identities are secret. It's out there, and Saif ul Haq to this day, pays bribes to NAU, for example, and he lives with me in my dorm, and he goes by the pseudonym of Bao, right? But in reality, it's Saif ul Haq wearing a quad nod mask, to move his eyes around his face a little bit and not be such an obvious disguise. Because the guy has fetal alcohol syndrome. He's 5'4". His head is the size of a grapefruit. He looks special. Not only is he special, but he looks it too. And so he has to go the distance with his disguises. And this is these are, top of the line military weapon systems, what, could be, metaphorically called assault weapons. And, these guys are basically complicit in fraud, embezzlement, and robbing our country of hundreds of billions of dollars. And I'm aware of it all because some special ed kid couldn't keep his mouth shut, and some stupid general couldn't keep his dick in his pants. And, that's where we're at. And that's where I'm at in my Yankee White Security-Clearance process, a security clearance for the cream of the crop. That's where I'm at right now. This is the desperation that my family and former friends, and former family, I should say, and former community has been driven to. They see all this money, and they would do anything, including rape, repeated rape, including attempts at murder. Not only did Sayyaf Abdullah sneak fentanyl into my pills and hoping to overdose me, but he also drove in opposing traffic towards me, and he had murder in his face when he was doing that, And Yeah, it's all so dirty. And I think the United States citizens deserve the right to know about this because maybe instead of somebody being selected for being vulnerable to get a very top of the line security clearance, which I'm blessed to think that I could compete for something like this. I really do think that I could be worthy of it, and I do think that given a chance to do good work, unlike this embezzlement type of activities, given the chance to do good work, I would be worthy of this security clearance. But the fact that this is how they choose the individuals they give security clearances to is very dirty. They choose somebody they perceive as vulnerable, somebody they perceive that they are going to be easily able to rob. That's who they choose. It isn't because this guy's top of the line, blah blah blah. Which I was kind of a combination of the two. I kind of think that's how I fell into their pool of selection. I'm kind of a type A personality. I try my best. I do my best. Um, and I think I kind of fell into both categories of being qualified, but also being perceived as vulnerable. And I just think these guys are damaging to national security in a multitude of ways. I think they should resign. And to be very honest, I think many of them should go to prison. That includes General Charles Brown, that includes General Tersini, that includes General Saif ul Haq, that includes General Sayyaf Abdullah, that includes General Ailet Abu Shanab. All of these people have done such horrific things to me and have even gone to great lengths as to use classified military cyber weaponry to erase evidence that I've collected on them. And at this point, I'm just going to be shouting it to the world because they keep doing these dirty things and their pattern of behavior has not changed. Saif ul Haq to this day is stalking me and wearing disguises and bribing, officials, including in right now the university that I'm attending, NAU. He's even bribing their staff, and so this is just my first vlog in a series of many. I just wanted to document my Yankee White, racketeering experience while trying to go about it in as honest of a way as possible. And I hope you guys enjoy the information that I'm putting out here. I wish the camera was lower so I could look you in the eyes, but instead I'm looking at my little teleprompter down here, all the information that I wrote down, and not super organized, but as organized as I could with the time that I have available, kind of a way. So forgive me if the video part isn't super appealing, but I hope you can take this information in. I hope you guys can try to change our country for the better. I'm sure gonna go ahead and try to do my part. Thank you so much. Bye now.